Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bill. In today's video, we are going to be looking at the War Magic, continuing that video series. We are in the Ultimate Magic for Pathfinder 1E, and we are going to look at Divine Spells. We're going to look at Divine Spells from 1st level to 6th level. I'll start with the Cleric and look at all those spells first, and then we'll go over the Druid second. Usually I'll mention the spells, level 1 spells, all of them, but I'll go in and only talk about the spells that are new in the Druid list compared to the Cleric list. So, without further ado, let's dive into the 1st level spells of a Cleric and see what spells are good in a big war battle. Usually all the spells in the list are good for your characters as adventurers, but we're looking at a big battlefield with armies clashing and whatnot. So without further ado, Decompose Corpse is the first spell on the list. Turns corpse into a clean skeleton. That's great for a necromancer. That's great if you want to transport the corpse to another destination and then reverse that spell to put the flesh back on it for a spell to bring them back to life or for proper burial. Diagnose disease, detect and identify diseases. That can be useful, especially if your army is in an area that suffers a lot of disease or if you're being sieged, so on and so forth. So I would put that on like a whole bunch of scrolls, give you wands of that to your clerics in your army, and have them help protect your army from the disease. Forbid action. Target obeys your command to not do something. It's a single target, so the only way that becomes useful is if you could use a feat on it to make it a mass spell, an area spell. Without that, that's pretty much not going to be great for a battlefield. Know the enemy. Gain +10 on monster knowledge checks. That's great if your enemy forces has something that is using like a beast or something to help fight that you don't have a lot of knowledge on, or you're trying to infiltrate an area where they're using a beast that you don't have a lot of knowledge on what would hurt it, how to combat it. So in the short term, that is good. For a big major battle, it's not great. So murderous command. Target is compelled to kill its ally. That's always entertaining to watch. But that's not great. So to deploy this in a military situation, give this to a bunch of your frontline soldiers with a device that they just need to say a command word to activate. Maybe they have it all on their shields or whatever, or every other one has it on their shield. They point it at the enemy, they say the command word, it activates. The person in front of them turns to their ally beside them and stabs them. Ray of Sickening. Ray makes the subject sickened. That would work as well. Put that on a bunch of one-use items, give it to your military to have them launch to the enemy's ranks, and then watch their morale plummet, watch their combat effectiveness go down. Remove sickness, suppresses disease, nausea, and the sickened condition. That'd be great as well on a massive use. So there again, scrolls, wands, one-use items. Restore corpse. Skeletal corpse grows flesh. So there's the reverse of the other spell we were talking about at the beginning. Sanctify corpse. Prevents a corpse from becoming an undead creature. If corpses are being turned into an undead army for an enemy necromancer raising a horde of undead to fight you guys, then if that's the case, Sanctify corpse on a massive use would be very, very useful. I'd create one-use pendants that when a person dies, Sanctify corpse is automatically cast upon them. That would eliminate their use as soldiers in that necromantic army. Summon minor monster. Summons 1d3 tiny animals. If you pick the right animals, that could be add to the confusion of the battlefield, but overall that's not going to be great. Now we're on to 2nd level cleric spells. Animate dead lesser, or lesser animate dead. Creates one skeleton or zombie. I would apply that as wands and give that to your spellcasters, and you now can raise an army of undead. Without any commands, all they're going to do is stand there, so if they're not under anyone's control, or if they're under control briefly, just command them to stand there. Then from there you can tell them to march, give them other orders, so on and so forth. Arrow of Law harms and possibly daze chaotic creatures. So Arrow of Law would be useful if you're fighting a lot of demons, for sure. But outside of that, I don't see it being 100% beneficial. Now, if you had a massive amount of these Arrows of Law, that all your archers could use this, then give them like 5 or 6 arrows. All of a sudden, you're taking out these chaotic outsiders quickly. Boiling Blood, target takes fire damage. Orcs get +2 strength. Boiling Blood's a single target. Now, if you can get that to affect a massive area, say adding the mass spell to it, problem is that puts you about 5th or 6th level. So you're burning, if you were spellcasting, you're burning a slot that's a lot higher for that. But if you're just doing it as an item, one-use item, it'd be very useful. Just try to avoid using it against the orcs. And if Boiling Blood lasts long enough, based on the duration I remember it, you can pretty much kill the low-level soldiers with Boiling Blood. Compassionate Ally, target is compelled to help injured ally. That would be that'd be useful to get your a little bit more chaos on the battlefield. This part of the shield ball takes some damage and starts to fall, or they're not slain but they're down. You cast that on the ones that aren't, and all of a sudden they're turning to help their allies that are injured, and now a section of the wall completely is collapsing. Delay Pain, ignore pain for 1 hour per level. That can be useful as a one-use item. For your side, Disfiguring Touch, that could be used as a good intimidation, but that would require display and everything else. So with that, you would have to play that as creative as you could, but for a massive military, unless you were using this before a battle began, it would not affect the outcome of the fight that much. Dreadbolt harms and possibly sickens good creatures. If you're fighting against good creatures because you're playing evil guys or 2 good forces against each other, that could be useful. That'd also be great against angels and celestials and whatnot. Imbue Aura, target emulates your cleric aura. That'd be good to confuse your enemies if they're trying to figure out how many clerics you got and whatnot. Masterwork Transformation makes a normal item into a masterwork one. That's a useful spell between battles. The problem is you're still paying the full cost for a masterwork item. Spellcaster wise, that's great because now you're not spending the time, you're just spending the cost. Protective Penumbra, shadow protects the target from light. That'd be really good if you're using undead that are really affected by the light. Shard of Chaos harms and possibly slows lawful creatures. Spear of Purity harms and possibly blinds evil creatures. So both of those would be very useful, especially as one-use items. Surmount Affliction temporarily suppresses one condition. That can be very useful. Give that as a one-use item amongst your soldiers, and if they're poisoned or diseased or whatever, they can use that to suppress that condition. And while that's suppressed, their morale won't be down. Web Shelter. Web Shelter is very conflicting. Last time I reviewed it, I'm sticking with. It's great. You can create the shelter out of a web. That will be a great place for you to hide and take shelter. But in a military situation, fire bad. Fire real bad. Now we're on the 3rd level cleric spells. Agonize, pain encourages an outsider to obey you. So if you needed to gain control of a demon or a devil that you summoned that you wouldn't gain control of just by summoning it, you'd use Agonize on it. But it doesn't specify demon or devil, it just says outsider, so you could use it for any outsider. Archon's Aura. Aura penalizes enemy attacks and AC. Now that would only be useful if you can do that to your whole military, so they're again one-use items. At this level, they'd start to get expensive because you're making one-use items with 3rd level spells. Badger's Ferocity. Weapons are keen while you concentrate. That wouldn't be great because even as a one-use item, you'd have to figure out how to get a concentration effect to last more than one turn. Other than that, it's a pretty good spell. Blessing of the Mole. 1 ally per level gains dark vision and +2 stealth bonus. That would be great for your players, for your strike team that's going in doing the spying, gathering the information, sort of raiding the enemy camp with a goal that's not necessarily to really kill the enemy, but to gather information and maybe sow some chaos of some sort. Key Leech. Add your key pool when you critically hit. Sands of Time. Target temporarily ages. I like that spell. But that's a single target, so there again, it has a lot of limits that way. So you need to put that on, say, a bunch of ranged weapons. Maybe put on a bunch of sling bullets, maybe on the arrowheads or bolt tips, and then make them touch activated. So when they hit a target, they don't have to pierce the armor to activate. Symbol of Healing. Triggered rune heals living creatures. That can be useful. Heal portions of your military. You bring up this cloth that has this symbol of healing on it. They unroll it and it activates. Vision of Hell. Illusionary hellscape makes creature shaken. That'd be great if you could do that to the battlefield before the enemy gets fully settled in. We're now into 4th level cleric spells. Aura of Doom. Creatures in your aura become shaken. That would be great. Put that on shields. You wouldn't even have to put it on very many shields. And activate it at the beginning of the clash between the two militaries, and all of a sudden they now have the shaking condition. So they would have a lot of hard time staying in formation, making morale checks to keep fighting. Blood Crow Strike. Unarmed strikes create crows that deal fire and negative energy damage. Well, right there's a damage multiplier, so I like that. If you wanted to implement a bunch of unarmed strikers in your military, that could be useful. Outside of that, I don't see that being great. But outside of a big war, that's a pretty good spell. Control Summoned Creature. That is great when your enemy's summoning creatures into the battlefield to fight. Cast that, you gain control for the duration of the Control Summoned Creature spell, or until the summoned spell ends, whichever happens first. But if your spell ends before the summoned spell ends, the creature goes back to obeying the summoner. So be careful how close you are as your spell gets closer to ending. Flesh Worm Infestation. Worm deals HP and dex damage. And that's just gruesome too. So cast that on a few guys and sit them back into the enemy camp. And let them deal with that. That by itself would be a morale dropper. Oracle's Vessel. Oracle only. Target gains the benefit of your Oracle's curse. Depending upon what curse you have as an Oracle, that could be useful. But then again, as a player, I don't like the Oracle class. So it's an interesting idea. And as an NPC, as a game master, it is great. But as a player, I don't like it. I'd rather be a cleric than a Oracle. Plague Carrier. Target's attacks carry Filth Fever. that's okay. Like, Plague Carrier by itself is interesting. Filth Fever's kind of a low-end disease, though. If you could choose what disease it carries, it would be a better spell. Ride the Waves. Target can breathe water and swim. Cast that on. Give that as one-use items to your military to traverse a body of water. Especially if it makes them lighter by not having to secure boats or transport a bunch of stuff to get across. Soothe Construct. Okay. Soothe Construct. Reduce the berserk chance of a construct. It's kind of... that could be useful if the enemy's using a lot of constructs and they tend to go berserk. But if I remember correctly, there's only like 2 or 3 constructs that really go berserk. Spit Venom. Spit Blinding Black Adder Venom. That could be useful. Now you just need to figure out how to give it to all your soldiers. At least all your soldiers in the front lines. So, one-use item. Maybe they have this... let's see the range of Spit Venom. Close, 25 feet plus 5 feet per level. Give it to your second row, your third row of soldiers. They drink a vial of this Spit Venom spell, and then they spit the venom. That would work. I have power issues going on right now, so just ignore that. So the Spit Venom, like I said, put it in like a flask of liquid that the second row or third row has, so that they're not actively fighting as the rows clash. They can then drink the venom and pick a target that's right in the front facing them and spit into their eyes. That would allow you to decimate their front line quickly. Hell, with all the other things they could do, your front lines could do before this could just be a backup, and they can do that to the second line when it takes up the front line. Okay, now we go Symbol of Revelation. Triggered symbol reveals illusions. If there's a lot of illusions being used, or you see a lot of illusions in the combats previously to this side that you're fighting, that could be very useful. Symbol of Slowing. Triggered rune slows creatures. Put that in an area where you need to funnel your enemy. Now all of a sudden they're slowing down even more, giving you plenty of opportunity to attack, plenty of opportunity to retreat, plenty of opportunity to do stuff. Terrible Remorse. Creature is compelled to harm itself. I don't find that one being great as a demoralizer for a military combat. Astral Projection. Lesser. Limited astral travel. Greater Contagion. That can be useful because you inflict a subject with a magical disease. Pick something that's very flashy as far as displayed on the skin or whatnot. Curse of Magic Negation. Target gains the negate spell Blight. That can be useful if you can get that on one of their mages. Major Curse. As Bestow Curse, but harder to remove. That won't be as great, not unless you can apply that to a mass, and at that point it's going to be beyond the levels of what we're trying to cover in this video. Fickle Winds. Wind walls selectively block attacks. That can be interesting and useful. Forbid Action. Greater. This one is as forbid action, but 1 creature per level. So by 5th level, you could hit about 11 creatures. You give that as one-use items to a few people to speak out and forbid them from attacking or whatever. That by itself would be worth it. Holy Ice creates wall or javelins of frozen holy water. Great way to fight some undead. Rapid Repair. Construct gains fast healing 5. Now that is mean. That is real mean if you're using the constructs in your battles. You cast Rapid Repair on it as it enters melee combat or after it starts taking damage, and all of a sudden they can't hit it and hurt it fast enough. Reprobation. Marked target is shunned by your religion. That's okay, but it's a single target. And it's not like, unless you really plan on using a lot of clerics on whichever side, it's not like that was going to make a big difference right away. Serenity. Peaceful feelings harm those attempting violence. That would be great on a massive scale. A bunch of one-use items that do that to your enemies. Symbol of Scrying. Triggered rune activates Scrying sensor. That's good for trapping or trying to spy in an area. Unholy Ice. Create wall or javelins of frozen unholy water. So it's the opposite. So this would be great to help your undead. 6th level cleric spells. Cold Ice Strike. Cone of ice slivers deal 1d6 cold damage per level. That's useful. It's always good to have extra cold and lightning spells in the repertoire. Epidemic. Infect a subject with a highly contagious disease. Now that is going to be useful, especially if you can get that into a sieged area. Joyful Rapture. Negate harmful emotions. Plague Storm. Cloud infects creatures like Contagion. That by itself would be very useful too. Symbol of Sealing. Creates triggered wall of force, which would also be useful, especially if you needed to trap something that's heavier hitting out of the enemy's military. Maybe they have a big creature, maybe they have a few knights on horseback, so on and so forth. Let's look at the druid spells now. Decompose Corpse for 1st level, Diagnose Disease, Frostbite, Ray of Sickening, Remove Sickness, Restore Corpse, Summon Minor Ally. Level 2 druid spells. Frigid Touch. Target takes cold damage and is staggered. Put that on a bunch of one-use items or ammunition. That could be very useful. Masterwork Transformation. Pernicious Poison. Tarball. Burning tar harms target and penalizes its dex. That can be useful, especially if you can get a few of those going at the same time. So, one-use items again. Unshakable Chill. Target is afflicted with severe cold. Not going to be that great. Now put that in a Mass Effect and you're going to really demoralize their military. War Train Mount. Animal gains the combat training general purpose. Web Shelter. Anthropomorphic Animal. Animal becomes bipedal. That can be good to intimidate your enemy if you cast that on a bunch of bulls. All of a sudden they think you got a bunch of minotaurs. Ash Storm. Hamper vision and movement. Badger's Ferocity. Weapons are keen while you concentrate. Burrow. Target gains burrow speed of 15. Burrow can be useful. Give that a mass scale and all of a sudden they can now tunnel into the enemy's stronghold. Burst of Nettles. Burst deals 3d6 damage and 1d6 acid. That would be very useful. Since your soldiers aren't going to have a lot of hit dice in a massive army, get a few of those going off and you can drop sections of their shield wall easily. Fungal Infestation. Target takes bleed from attacks. Mad monkeys summon a swarm of mischievous monkeys. That'd be good just for the chaos. Rain of frogs summon a swarm of poisonous frogs. That would be good because it's poisonous frogs and it would add a lot of chaos to the battlefield. Spit venom, we already covered that. Vermin shape 1, take the form and some powers of a small or medium vermin. Imagine them turning into a medium-sized scorpion. Start grabbing people, either throwing them or stinging the hell out of them and tossing them. Medium size doesn't quite fit the visual size that I go for when I'm looking for that, though you need like large or huge. Lesser age resistance, ignore penalties for middle age. Arboreal hammer, tree branches attack opponents. Now that can be useful. You funnel them down to an area where there's a few trees, and then you cast that on them. As the enemies come through, they get pummeled by all these tree branches. Atavism, animal gains advanced creature simple template. Cape of wasps, wasp swarm defends and carries you. Interesting. Echolocation, sonic sense gives you blind sight 40 feet. That can be very useful, especially if you're going underground or fighting creatures that like to drop darkness like the drow. That could be very useful. Plague carrier, target's attacks carry filth fever. Ride the waves, target can breathe water and swim. Touch of slime, touch infests the target with green slime. That can be useful. Vermin shape 2 has vermin shape, but tiny or large. Volcanic storm, hot rocks deal 5d6 damage. 5th level druid spells. Greater contagion, fickle winds, raise animal companion. It's like raise dead, but only works on the animal companion, so very specific for the druid. Reprobation, mark target is shunned by your religion. 6th level druid spell, age resistance, eagle airy, summon 1 giant eagle per 3 levels. That can be useful for your strike team trying to fly and sneak into a place, or fly and get from place to place. Epidemic, infects subject with highly contagious disease. Plague storm, cloud infects creatures like contagion. So those are the spells. Those are what I find useful, and those are the ways that you can make them very useful in a military situation. Well, we will be in a different book next time we do another video on the war magic, which will probably be next week, but if not, it'd be the week after. So, well, until we meet again, guys.